To the lecture for Module 5. I hope you're having a great day so far. If not, well, it's about to get a whole lot better because we're about to learn some economics. All right. So, in this lecture, we're going to talk about a competitive market and how it is described in the supply and demand model. But we're going to focus on the demand curve for this lecture. Okay. We're also going to talk about the difference between movements along the demand curve and changes in demand, which is going to be a shift. And we're going to talk about the factors that will actually cause that shift in the demand curve specifically. All right, now, a couple things that we have to understand first is what a competitive market is. A competitive market is a market where there are many buyers and sellers, all selling an identical good or service. All right, in order for that to be competitive, those two things have to be the case. You can't have a monopoly, as an example, because then we wouldn't have many sellers, right? There has to be lots of people trying to purchase a good, otherwise something will just be sitting there and no one will try and buy it. It's also important that we compare the same good, or we look at the market for a single good, because you can't compare apples to oranges, literally in this case. You have to look at just apples or just oranges. All right, now, the demand schedule and the demand curve. I do want you to go ahead and write down, hold on, give me a second to get my pen ready. Here we go. There we go. All right, I want you to write down this demand schedule. We're in that little grid that's to the left in the middle of your notes page. Basically, what a demand schedule is, it shows us how much of a good or a service consumers will want to buy at different prices. All right, so you look at your good and you say, okay, if we're looking at the market for cotton, for example, when the price is $2, that means that the market for cotton, people will buy 7.1 billion pounds of cotton. This should say cotton here. Fun fact, the first edition of this book actually used beans instead of cotton, and so they didn't update this when it came time. So there you go, a little insight into the textbook industry for you. All right, so go ahead and write down this demand schedule here. Now, you should notice, and we're going to talk about this here in the next module, more specifically the laws of supply and demand, but what happens as the price goes down? All right, well, the quantity demanded here is going to increase, all right, and that's the law of demand. As price goes down, more people want to buy it. And that's true of pretty much any good. All right. Now, I want you to go ahead and draw this demand curve. Don't worry about drawing these dotted lines here, but go ahead and try and roughly match it up here to match your demand schedule that you wrote earlier. All right. A demand curve is a graphical representation of the demand schedule. All right, it shows how much of a good or service consumers want to buy at any given price. All right, so again, don't worry about these dotted lines. You don't have to connect them. Just make sure you plot your points here and then you connect them there. All right. Again, this shows us how when the price goes down, quantity demanded is increasing. All right. It's very important that on almost all of your graphs, you label the origin point here as 0, because that'll help you remember that as we go to the right on the x-axis, okay, as we go right, that's an increase, and as we go up on the y-axis, that's an increase as well. I remember when I was first learning economics, increasing, going right, always threw me off for some reason. I'm sure you guys are better at this stuff than I was in terms of graphing and whatnot, but just for you to remember that, okay? Hold on, there's an announcement. I'm sure it's very important.
I need Renard Combo to the front office. Renard Combo.
All right, so clearly that was not very important. All right, shifts of the demand curve. Now, an increase in population and other factors, all right, generate an increase in demand. So an increase in the population and other factors generate an increase in demand, which is a rise in the quantity demanded at any given price. So now we are talking about the shifts in the demand curve. All right. So when population goes up, all right, obviously there's more people now to buy a good, So obviously, even though the price is $2, we're going to have more quantity purchased there. And that's true for every single point along the demand schedule. All right. Now, this just shows you that on the left you have your demand schedule for 2012, on the right for 2013. All right. A shift, just like in the production possibility curve, is going to be shown by a whole new curve shifting to the right. In this case, because it was an increase in demand. Now, if we were to go up and let's say population decreased, all right, instead of increased, then that would actually, these numbers would all be less than in that case, all right? So it's important that you be thinking about how does this impact? Is it going to increase demand, decrease demand? Is it going to increase supply, decrease supply? Is it going to increase the production possibility curve, right? And so on and so forth for every single graph that we learn in this class, okay? Let's see. So go ahead and draw this shift here and plot your points from your new demand schedule. You do not have to write down the new demand schedule, but go ahead and pause it here and write this down. Pause it here and plot your points from this demand schedule here onto your same demand graph where you drew it before, and then draw the arrow, obviously, showing that shift. Okay, it's important that you annotate it. Don't forget to label as well. Demand curve 1, demand curve 2. If you don't label, you're not going to get your points. All right, so make sure you do that. Now, a movement along the curve is basically going to be caused by a change in price. Okay, I'm just going to go ahead and write that down here so that way it's known. Movement is caused by a change in price. That was going to happen. There you go. Basically, if the price drops suddenly for cotton, as it shows here, as it goes from $1.50 to $1, all right, we are going to have an increase in the quantity demanded for cotton right here. So it went from Q1 to Q2 right there. And this will make more sense later when we're shifting the curves and when both supply and demand are on the same graph. But for now, just know that a change in price, all right, is what's going to cause a movement. All right. Now, an increase is going to be a shift to the right. A decrease is going to be a shift to the left. Pretty straightforward there. So these are the rest of the things that are going to cause a shift in the demand curve. So the first is going to be changes in the prices of related goods. So a substitute, all right, as for two goods are substitutes, if a fall in the price of one good makes consumers less willing to buy the other good, I'm actually going to, don't write this part down. I'm going to define substitutes and complements for you later, which is what you're going to write down. But, all right, you just need to know that with a substitute good, if the price of one good goes up, then people will demand the other good. An example of a substitute good in this case might be apples and oranges, right? Let's say you're going grocery shopping and every week you buy apples. You got to have your Granny Smith apples. But one day you show up at Kroger and instead of being 50 cents a piece, they're now $3 a piece. Well, you're going to be like, wait a second, I can't afford to buy Granny Smith apples. That's $21 a week in apples. I can't afford that. Well, you look over and you see the oranges are priced at 60 cents a piece. You're like, okay, I'll just buy an orange and I'll switch it up. All right, so that's an example of a substitute good. A complement is when two goods are complements. If a fall in the price of one good makes people more willing to buy the other good. So an example of a complementary good might be cheese and crackers, right? I'm talking about the fancy cheese here. So fancy cheese and fancy crackers. So if, let's say you go to the store and you see that the fancy brie cheese is on sale in the little cheese department that they now have at the Kroger right next to the high school, you're probably like, oh, that looks great. And you put that in your shopping basket. And then you're like, wait a second, what am I going to eat this cheese with? And luckily, they've got their crackers right there next to it. So you just pick up a box of crackers and stick them in your basket as well. That's an example of a complementary good. All All right. Another thing that'll cause a shift in the demand curve is change in income. Okay, so this right here, before I get to that, this is what I do want you to write down. Not gonna work. Oh no. For some reason my pen is not working right now. That's all right. Okay, so basically I want you to write down substitute and complementary right here, where it says substitutes versus complements. Okay, so a change in income, basically if income goes up, people are going to buy more normal goods. Normal good is basically like fancier things, right? So name brand products, maybe Apple iPhones, as opposed to the Walmart brand of cell phones, if they even still make those anymore. Just as an example, okay? An inferior good is when a rise in income decreases the demand for a good. So think about maybe store brand products or anything that's seen as like kind of cheaper quality. That's an inferior good. All right, things that are at the dollar store, right? Things like that. I'm not hating on that stuff. I'm just saying that's an inferior good, because when people make more money, they tend to buy more expensive goods and services. All right, now I explained what a substitute was earlier, so I'm not going to explain it again. And a complementary good, just make sure you write both of those down. If you have to pause the video, go ahead and do that. Now, the last two things that are going to cause a shift in the demand curve, the last one's going to be a change in tastes, and then a change in expectations. So taste is pretty self-explanatory, so sometimes things go in and out of style. Your textbook uses top hats as an example. Top hats used to be very common amongst men in the United States, all the way through until like the 1960s, and they went out of style. A more recent example might be those fidget spinners, right? Those were super popular for about 3 months, like 2 years ago. Now, I haven't seen a fidget spinner in this whole school year, actually, now that I think about it. So, so that's an example of a change in taste. Sometimes things go in, sometimes things go out. So that's a change in taste. Expectations. So let's say that you expect the price of something to drop in the future. If you're thinking about it in your head, you're probably not going to buy that product. A good example of that is getting close to Black Friday. So let's say you're in the market for a TV or another electronic or something that is probably going to be on sale on Black Friday, and it's like November 15th, like a week and a half before Thanksgiving. Well, you're probably going to put off buying that product until it's on sale, because you're going to be able to save money. All right, so that decreases the demand for a product today in order to increase it later. Conversely, if you think the price is going to go up in the future, you're more likely to buy something today. So think of concert tickets in this case, right? If there's a really popular concert, if Beyonce or Taylor Swift or, insert your favorite band here, right, is coming to town, and that, there's going to be a lot of people that want to go see the show, you're going to log on as soon as tickets go on sale, so you don't have to buy them later on StubHub at much higher prices for that. All right, so you're buying more now so that you don't have to pay more later. We're not going to worry about that or that. Here's a real life example of things, and we'll talk more about this in class. But the city of London was basically dealing with a lot of traffic, because there's a lot of people that live there. And so what they started doing is putting a fee for being in they called it a congestion charge on all cars entering the city, about £8. 3 years later, that decreased traffic by about 10% than it was before the charge. And that is with more people living there and other things. So basically, by charging that fee, they force people to think, do I really need to drive into the city today, or can I take the subway, or can I just not go into the city today? Right? It's only people who are going in there. All right, so that was a good lecture, I think. I know I'm biased, but if you have any questions, write them down, shoot me an email, leave me a comment on Google Classroom. If not, I will see you back here in the next class, and I hope you have a great rest of your day.